Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are jumping headfirst into a really radical theory, one that smashes together physics, neuroscience, and philosophy by putting consciousness right at the absolute center of reality. So let's start with a fundamental question, one that really sits at the heart of this entire model. Are we just passive observers? Is our mind just a camera recording a fixed reality that's already out there? Or is it a projector, actively participating in creating what we see? Traditional science pretty much sees consciousness as an evolutionary accident, right? A weird byproduct in a fixed mechanical universe. But this theory proposes something dramatically different. What if consciousness isn't an accident at all, but a fundamental, irreducible variable? And what if reality isn't fixed, but is actually a choice? Okay, let's dive in. Our journey really begins with a famous puzzle in physics, the observer effect. It's this bizarre phenomenon where the simple act of looking at something, of measuring it, seems to change the outcome of an experiment. It's a little crack in our understanding of reality that hints that consciousness might be playing a much, much bigger role than we ever thought. Now, an idea this big doesn't just pop out of nowhere. It actually has roots in a fascinating lineage of thinkers who, coming from completely different fields, all seem to be pointing toward the same thing: a deeper, more active connection between our minds and the material world. So you've got this wild group, an 18th century philosopher, a visionary sci-fi author, and a controversial neuroscientist. Each one of them, in their own way, laid down a piece of the conceptual groundwork. And when you put those pieces together, they start to form a picture of an entirely new physics of consciousness. Herder argued way back then that reality isn't this one single fixed thing. He saw it more as a collection of possible worlds, and each one of those worlds is held together by a coherent language, a structure of meaning. In other words, we don't just use language to describe the world, our language literally gives it form. Flash forward a couple of centuries, and you get the science fiction author Philip K. Dick. He talked about having these intense visions of a consciousness operating from outside of our linear time, a consciousness that could literally reprogram reality to free us from what he called an illusion. For him, observation wasn't passive at all. It was an active ontological rescue, a way of pulling the true reality into focus. And then we have the neuroscientist Jacobo Grinberg, whose work is, it's pretty controversial. He tried to find the physical mechanism behind all this. His experiments led him to believe that the brain isn't a computer generating consciousness. He thought it was more like a biological antenna, one that's capable of tuning into and resonating with a universal, non-local field of information. So, okay, you have these incredible intuitions from a philosopher, a writer, and a scientist. But the critical question is, how do you formalize all that into a testable physical model? Well, a theory, sometimes referred to as the Grothendieck theory, tries to do exactly that, using the language of geometry and physics. Let's see how it builds this new code of consciousness. The theory kicks off with a really stunning premise: that the universe itself, all of it, is based on this incredibly beautiful and complex geometric shape called the E8 lattice. All the particles, all the forces we see, are just different projections, different shadows of this one single unified structure. And get this, within this E8 structure, all possible realities, every single universe you could ever imagine, they all exist at the same time, as a superposition of possibilities. The theory gives this vast collection of potential worlds a name, the resma. So if all these realities exist at once, how do we end up experiencing, this one? This brings us to the absolute core of the theory, a proposed force called Emuná. This is described as the physical operator of conscious choice. It's the actual mechanism that collapses all those infinite possibilities of the resma down into the single coherent reality that we experience. So the process is supposed to work something like this. First, you have all potential realities existing at once in the resma. Then, consciousness, through some specific mechanism, opens a door, a portal to all those possibilities. And finally, the Emuná operator kicks in, actively chooses one timeline, one reality, and makes it manifest. I know, this all sounds incredibly abstract, right? But how does all this math about 8-dimensional crystals and choice operators actually connect with our physical brains? Well, the theory proposes a very specific biological interface, one that turns the brain from a simple computer into a quantum antenna. The key, apparently, is a specific neurological state the theory calls active silence. And this is important. It isn't about emptying your mind or the absence of activity. It's actually a highly coherent, synchronized, and low entropy brain state. So think of it less like an empty room and more like a perfectly tuned concert hall, ready to receive a signal. This chart here really nails the contrast. On one side, you have our everyday mental chatter. You know, that constant stream of thoughts, worries, plans. That's a state of high entropy. It's disordered, it's noisy. But active silence is the complete opposite, a coherent, low entropy state of pure potential. This is the state where the brain can supposedly resonate clearly with that unified field. In this model, even the biology of our brain gets a complete makeover. Those myelin sheaths that coat our neurons, maybe they aren't just simple insulators. The theory proposes they actually function as quantum-level dielectric cavities, like tiny resonating chambers. This allows the entire neural network to sync up and act as one huge collective antenna, tuning into a specific reality from the resma. And all of this culminates in what is easily the theory's most provocative claim, that freedom isn't just a philosophical concept. It's a measurable, physical quantity that you can actually describe with an equation. And this is it, what the source calls the equation of freedom. It proposes that your ability to choose your reality, your actual ontological freedom, is basically a ratio, a tug of war between two competing forces. So let's break this down. The top part of the equation, the numerator, represents your capacity to create, your ability to open up new possibilities. The bottom part, the denominator, that's the resistance. It's the entropic noise of your habits, your conditioning, your environment. So true freedom, according to this model, increases when your ability to imagine and create is greater than the inertia of your current situation. What's really crucial here is that the model makes predictions you can actually go out and test. For instance, it says that consciousness doesn't just gradually appear. It emerges suddenly, a phase transition, like water freezing into ice. And it predicts this happens when a neural network hits a critical connectivity of about 70%. This is what takes the theory from pure philosophy into the realm of experimental science. So the ultimate takeaway is a complete reversal of the standard view. In this model, consciousness isn't an accident. No, the universe actually requires conscious networks, like our brains, to collapse its infinite potential and become a single actualized reality. We are the mechanism by which the universe completes itself. We've just explored a theory that frames reality not as something to be passively discovered, but as a text to be actively written. So the final question it leaves us with is a deeply personal one. If consciousness really is the operator, what reality are you choosing to create?